It's time for business news now. Matthew Warren is back on set. Matthew, you're looking at the business angle of the Egypt story that we've been covering a lot in the news today. The turmoil there is taking its toll on the economy.
That's right, Cyril. Lots of economic effects as well. There was a plan earlier this week to increase taxes on things including cigarettes, alcohol, mobile phone calls. That wasn't very popular. That was quickly withdrawn, but that's damaging Cairo's attempts to cut its budget deficit, and it's also delayed payment of an important loan to Egypt from the International Monetary Fund.
Amidst a political crisis, there was no appetite for austerity in Cairo. On Sunday, President Morsi had announced details of a raft of tax hikes, including on cigarettes, alcohol and mobile phone calls, in an effort to reduce Egypt's budget deficit. Just hours later, the measures were suspended, thought to be an effort to win over voters ahead of Saturday's constitutional referendum. Unable to make the cuts required by the IMF, Egypt requested that payment of its $4.8 billion loan be delayed because of the political turmoil.
The president has decided to stop applying those laws until they are discussed as part of a wider social dialogue. And then we can see what could be done about those measures.
The IMF agreed the loan with Cairo on several conditions, including increasing the number of products subject to sales tax, creating more income tax bands, and reforming energy subsidies. The goal to bring down Egypt's budget deficit from 11% this year to 8.5% of GDP next year. Confirming the delay, the IMF said it remains in close contact with the Egyptian authorities and stands ready to continue supporting the country during the ongoing transition and to consult with them on the resumption of discussions. But those talks may strike a different tone. The delay in implementing the austerity measures, coupled with the political instability, have further harmed Egypt's economy, and a new deal with the IMF may require even harsher cuts.
And with all this, the Egyptian stock market has been suffering as well.
Yes, and in fact, for a long part of 2012, it had been one of the best performing this year. But you can see what happened. This is over the last 6 months, went up and up, but has started to fall since all that turmoil.
Now, how are the European markets looking this Wednesday, Matthew?
Well, they're all just opening up, and it's a pretty mixed picture. They're flat overall. You can see they're just some slight gains all moving around.
Very slight, yeah.
Milan doing slightly better, up 0.5%, and markets will be watching what happens there later today. They're trying to sell 6.5 billion euros of bonds. We'll see whether they have to pay higher rates after all that instability. That is the picture in Asia at the close of trading today. The markets all finishing up. Just look at the Kospi there after that North Korean rocket launch. They weren't that bothered. It managed to close 0.5% higher.
And there are several important meetings that you're going to be monitoring today across the business world.
Yes, a lot for investors to chew over. Firstly, the Federal Reserve, the American central bank, will be wrapping up 2 days of policy meetings, and there's wide expectation they're going to announce some more monetary easing. That's to help boost the economy. That will be later this Wednesday. Also, the oil-producing organisation OPEC will be meeting. They'll be choosing a new Secretary General on Wednesday, and Saudi Arabia, the world's biggest oil producer, is lining up against both Iraq and Iran, actually pushing their own contenders, all to succeed Libya's Abdullah el-Badri. Otherwise, the OPEC's expected to keep its oil production at around 30 million barrels a day.
And if we look at what's going on here in Europe, finance ministers today are going to be trying to work out how to regulate Europe's banks.
Yeah, now there's general agreement that the European Central Bank should have a supervisory role, but the devil is in the detail. And that's because both France and Germany can't agree on whether it should be big banks only or all banks. France wants all banks. Also, Germany says there needs to be more time to get this all underway. And then countries like Sweden and the UK, which are outside the Eurozone, don't want to see too much infringement of their own banking supervision. So plenty of details to work out there. Well, let's get some of the day's company news now. And more job losses are planned at French car maker Peugeot Citroën. That's according to unions who say an extra 1,500 jobs will be cut. That's on top of the 8,000 already announced. Well, shares in Peugeot Citroën are up 6% this morning on that news.
Matthew, this is an interesting one. Italian drivers queued to buy petrol late on Tuesday. That was in advance of a 60-hour strike by petrol stations. Unions claim owners of petrol stations are seeing their profits squeezed by oil companies. A minimum service will be available on motorways with at least one station open every 100 kilometers.
And no sale yet for France as it tries to sell Rafale jets to Brazil. The Brazilian president Dilma Rousseff says that a deal to buy 36 of the jets will depend on a pickup in the Brazilian economy. France's Dassault Aviation is up against rivals Boeing and Saab for the €4.5 billion deal.
And if we stay with Brazil now, they're hoping that some upcoming sporting events will also help the economy there.
Yes, now, for a while, Brazil was a star of the world economy, had great growth, 7.5% in 2010.
It's no longer
for example,
the case.
No, last year about 2.7%, so starting to slip back. Still not bad from a European context, but slower than previously. Well, now some of the country's regions are hoping that they're going to get a sporting boost.
2 major tournaments in 2 years have sent football fever in Brazil into overdrive. With construction of venues still underway, everyone wants a piece of the action.
We've already made giant figures of people like Pelé, Maradona, Joseph Blatter, Jose Maria Marim, and we're also planning caricatures of other great icons, not just from Brazil, but other countries too.
Still, it's not all been about football. With growth of just 0.6% over the last quarter, half what had been forecast, Brazil's mighty economy has started to sputter. Low investment and high labour costs haven't helped, though the government's kicked off with a programme of stimulus measures aimed at pumping $50 billion into the economy. It's also pinning further hopes on a boost from football tourism, as long as the infrastructure's completed on time.
Actions were taken in November last year to speed up the construction process, including an increase in our workforce to 4,500 employees. These measures mean the project is advancing at an average of 6.5% each month. Hopefully we will meet the deadline, which is April 2013.
Brazil's economy is still expanding, but if the authorities want it to regain its earlier energy, they'll have to improve the nation's competitiveness, both on and off the pitch.
Now, staying on the sporting theme, Matthew, this is very strange. The world's #1 tennis player has made a rather surprising investment.
Yes, now Novak Djokovic is not only the world's #1 tennis player, he's also the #1 earning tennis player. $13 million this year is estimated, and that's not including sponsorship deals. Well, what would you do with a huge amount of money like that?
I've got some ideas. Probably not the same thing that he did, though.
Would you buy donkey cheese? Well, here's donkey's cheese being made. He has bought the entire annual production of donkey cheese. It's all made in Serbia, apparently, and he's bought them because he's opening a chain of restaurants. Now, Serbia is his homeland, where he comes from. Now, you may be sceptical about this, but I want to tell you that donkey cheese is very expensive. It takes 25 litres to make 1 kilo, and that can cost €1,000, so it better be good.
I once had camel cheese. I'm not very adventurous with my cheeses anymore. Thank you very much, Matthew Warren. That was Matthew with the business news there. More world news coming up on France 24 in just a few minutes.